I will certainly provide that for you. Yes, Jack.
Kayleigh, how often does the president talk to Director Vogt or Acting Director Vogt from the OMB?
To who?
To the Acting Director of OMB.
Often. He just was in the Oval Office with the president, so they do speak often. I don't have a readout of the president's schedule, but they do speak regularly.
So if he wanted to flag to him his concerns about Michigan, why didn't he just tell him instead of sending a tweet?
Because the president believes in unprecedented transparency, and I'm sure you as a journalist are very eager and excited when you learn about the president's decision-making process in real time, whether that's on Twitter or from me here up at the podium.
You just said that was the reasoning for him expressing
I didn't say
concerns.
that was the reasoning, but I'm saying this is a transparent president, and I think that that's something that you should be lauding rather than questioning as to why he decided to tweet this. Yes.
Apart from President Macron, do you have any other answers from G7 leaders that they are definitely willing to come here?
So I won't get into the president's private conversations and correspondences with world leaders, but we do hope to see this happen. We hope that...
How can you characterize the response as being great, sounds like a good idea, or thinking about it?
So I don't have any information about the response from world leaders, but we certainly hope to see this happen. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Could you clarify, please, President Trump's comments about saying that it was a good idea, it was good that there were so many positive tests for COVID-19, whereas a lot of people look at that and say that this was actually terrible, that we have actually 1/3 of all the cases in the world.
Well, look, I would note this, that the president, what he was saying there is that we are testing. When you have more cases, in order to identify those cases, you have to have tested a high volume of people. So the more you test, the more cases numerically, not necessarily as a percent positive, but numerically, you will see just by sheer volume of your testing. And the president's done an extraordinary job on this front. Washington Post surveyed governors' offices and state health departments and found that at least a dozen states have testing capacity that outstrips the supply of patients. That's a very good job done by our federal government in supporting the states. To cite the governor of New York again, quote, "We have more sites and more testing capacity than we're using." So we're testing a lot, and thus we're finding a number of cases, but as we safely reopen, we do have some encouraging numbers on that front, that we continue to see a week-over-week decline, a 15% decline in deaths in just the last week. April 1st to mid-May, 50% decline in new hospitalization and under 25,000 cases today, so we are seeing progress. Yes.
Kayleigh, can you tell us what law specifically the president thinks the Secretary of State in Michigan broke by sending out the applications? And did the Secretary of State in Georgia also break that law by sending out applications for their primary?
Again, I'd reference you to the campaign. These are ballot questions, and I'd reference you to the campaign on that.
He's the president,
That's
and
my
you're
former
his
employer. My
spokesperson.
current employer is the White House. So
But,
thank you.
yes, but that's not a campaign question. That's the president of the United States saying that
It's a campaign
state
question on
broke a
ballot
law.
initiatives that you have and absentee ballots. So I would refer you to the campaign on that front. And I would note to you that many of those ballots that are submitted via mail can be fraudulent. I cited to you the bipartisan study. I can read it again. Maybe you weren't paying attention when I read it the first time, so I'll read it again. President Carter, a Democrat, not a Republican, and James Baker concluded that these ballots remained the largest source of potential voter fraud. So if you cast a ballot via mail and you do so fraudulently, that would be an illegal act, and I'd point you to that. And for further, I'd point you to my former employer, which is the Trump campaign.
Is the president concerned
Any other
about fraud in
questions?
Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Kayleigh. Two questions, if I may. Firstly, on airports. The TSA is reportedly considering setting up temperature checks at airports. Given the numbers of people who can be asymptomatic or sick without a fever, do you think that's sufficient? And why wasn't more done to have screening at airports sooner, particularly in light of the House oversight investigation that called screening from international hotspots in March limited and stagnant?
So the president is working with TSA. He's working with airlines. We want to ensure that our TSA employees are safe, that those who are traveling are safe, and he has had those conversations, and we are keeping people safe at the TSA and the passengers as well.
Over 500 TSA employees have become sick, and 6 are dead. So again, do you think this has been enough action and soon enough?
We've taken action. We're working with the TSA. We're keeping America's essential workers safe, and we are praying for all of those who have been affected by coronavirus.
On another front, I wanted to ask about the president's son and business partner, Eric Trump. He recently said of coronavirus that, quote, "The Democrats are trying to milk this," and predicted it will, quote, magically all of a sudden go away and disappear, and everyone will be able to reopen after the election in November. Do you think Eric Trump's comments are accurate and also appropriate?
I think we all hope coronavirus goes away, and I think as we continue to take the president and his family out of context, we should endeavor to quote them accuracy, and I think we should all hope that the coronavirus goes.
Oh, was inaccurate?
We should all hope that the coronavirus goes away. Yes.
Is there a timeline for when UK and European Union citizens and visitors are allowed to come back into the United States? And will all European countries be included, or could it be a case-by-case basis?
So we don't have a timeline on that just yet. I can tell you the president's preeminent concern is keeping Americans safe. His travel restrictions have saved lives, as Dr. Fauci and others have noted. So we don't have an announcement as to when we'll be rolling those back, but his priority, his number one concern is America first and the health and well-being of the nation first. Yes.
Thanks, Kayleigh. A spokesman for Governor Whitmer said that she isn't planning to meet with the president and wasn't given an invitation tomorrow. I was wondering if there's a reason why
That
wouldn't meet
Governor
with her.
Whitmer said.
Whitmer in Michigan wasn't extended an invitation to the president's appearance in Michigan tomorrow, and I was wondering if there's a reason why he wasn't going to meet with her like other governors.
I don't think there was a particular reason. It didn't come up, but while on that note, I would point to Governor Whitmer. It sounds like she's curious about an invitation, but she should be quite happy that thanks to this federal government, FEMA obligated more than $216.2 million to Michigan, 8.6 million N95 respirators, 740,000 18 surgical masks, 311,571 face shields. I should round these up or we'll be here all day. 760,000 gloves, 700 ventilators. The president has done quite a bit for Michigan, and her concern's an invitation, but she should be thanking the president for all the supplies that he's delivered to her state. Yes.
Yes, Kayleigh, the president has made clear that he's concerned about liability issues as companies reopen now. Is the White House engaged with Republican senators about this issue? And would the president sign another bill, another COVID bill, without liability being addressed in that?
So I won't lay out the president's conditions or lack thereof for any upcoming legislation. He has mentioned it, that it's something that needs to be looked at closely, and he is looking at closely, and he is discussing with members of the Hill about that. But he has made clear in terms of a phase 4 that he wants to be slow as we approach a phase 4 and not rush forward with spending trillions more dollars of taxpayer money. We've done a lot so far, and he'll look at doing more in the future, and liability is definitely something that he's concerned about and working on. Yes. It's right back there.
Oh, one more on G7. Do you think that it would be appropriate to hold a G7 summit in the U.S. while ordinary citizens are still not allowed to travel freely, for example, from Europe?
Yeah, the president wants us to start reopening. Travel restrictions are something that, he wants to make sure American lives are protected before those are lifted. But that being said, I do think it's entirely appropriate, so does the president, to have a G7 here. America's reopening, the world's reopening. And what a show of strength and optimism to have all of the leaders of these countries come together at the White House and pursue business as usual and as we move forward through this pandemic. Is there anyone I haven't gotten to? I guess not. Okay, so we'll do a few more. Yeah, I had a brief answer to your question. So go ahead.
Kayleigh, Susan Rice wrote an op-ed yesterday in the New York Times that said that President Trump has kowtowed to President Xi, and also has said that called his response to the coronavirus deadly, classified as a deadly mishandling. What's the White House's response to that?
So you said that came from Susan Rice, was it? Okay, so first I would want to take a moment to address the president's response, because the president has had an extraordinary and early response to the coronavirus. I would note Dr. Birx, the early work of President Trump, both with travel restrictions and quarantine, has bought us the time and space necessary to have this task force be very effective. Dr. Fauci saying that the president's response has been impressive. You can't imagine under any circumstance that anyone could be doing anything more. I can go through the actions. There's a detailed timeline out there of January 6th, Wuhan issuing a travel notice issued on Wuhan when there were 0 cases in the United States. The 17th, 0 reported U.S. cases, and there were public health entry screenings at major U.S. airports. Of course, the infamous travel restrictions that were called xenophobic by Democrats on January 31st. A lot of action in February on developing a test and making sure we were moving forward as speedily as possible on that. Keep in mind, in late February, Pelosi was saying, come to Chinatown, it's very safe, but the president had already taken very early action. And I know you brought up Susan Rice in that context, but I'm going to bring her up in another context that's equally as newsworthy, and that is the email that was declassified from Susan Rice on Inauguration Day, which is so peculiar. It set the scene. It's Inauguration Day. You're moving out of the White House. This is the most powerful building on planet Earth. Susan Rice is moving out, reflecting on her time here, and what is she doing? She's not packing her boxes. She's not being nostalgic about her time in the White House. What she's doing is writing an email where 3 times she writes that President Obama emphasized to conduct the investigation into Michael Flynn by the book, by the book, by the book. She writes it 3 times. As Shakespeare said, thou doth protest too much, Susan Rice. He didn't have the Susan Rice part in there, but I'll add that in. 2, she was asked specifically about the unmasking of Michael Flynn after she discussed it on January 5th in the Oval Office with Obama, after she wrote this email to herself on Inauguration Day. She was asked by good journalist Judy Woodruff about this email and about the unmasking of Michael Flynn, not the email, but the unmasking. She was asked specifically about Nunes's claim specifically. So let me clarify, it was Nunes's claim. And she said, I know nothing about this, so it was a lie. And then Susan Rice, since no one brought it up to me, I will bring it up to you. Her attorney said that this was the first opportunity 3 weeks after this Oval Office meeting that she had to write this email memorializing her Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama discussing Michael Flynn. It was her first opportunity, she said. Interesting, because she had an opportunity in those 3 weeks on January 10th to do a passing of the baton event with none other than Michael Flynn, where she praised him, wished him success, and talked about the great transition into the White House. And then on January 12th, she was able to participate in a story that published on that date in the lifestyle section of the Washington Post. So she never had time to write this email until Inauguration Day as she's rushing out the door, when in fact she had an opportunity to do all of those things. I'll leave that with you. Thank you for bringing up Susan Rice, not in the context that I wished, but for allowing me to share that with you.
Come on.